It's good to have you. So you live like in the Cayman Islands or something, right? Or is that where you are right now?
Yeah, I'm in my house, my beach house in Little Cayman today. So I
Little
live between
Cayman.
Grand Cayman and Little Cayman.
And why are you in the Cayman Islands?
It's beautiful, and
Okay.
it's just a nice place to. It's a nice place to live. I'm English, so I don't pay tax here either, which is also nice.
Yeah. We had a guy on the last episode that was, he's in Puerto Rico, and he was just like, oh man, like, he's like, he's like, I can't believe you're living in California. Like, he's like, you have to keep the money you make. And he was really laying into me about, paying basically 50% tax, and he was like, kept showing me the pool behind him, and how he's like, I just sit there 20 days out of the month right by this pool because, I don't have to work because I keep all my money from taxes. And I was like, okay, all right. I get your point.
Yeah, you just pay it to the supermarket here because everything's so fucking expensive.
Well, I lived expat my whole life. So like, yeah, I know what you mean where you want to buy some product you're familiar with and you're paying like, $30 for a box of cereal, and it's a bit strange, but you do it because you still kind of net out ahead. But it is funny how that works. Listen, I was going to ask you about, I don't know if I don't know how much we care about, how much we want to basically go into the sort of impending war that's going on and all this crazy stuff. I wrote something in my newsletter today, which was like, there's a lot of tech VC that basically, like overnight will become a geopolitical expert and pandemic with a minor in pandemics. And like, the next thing they sort of feel like, if you're smart in one area, that doesn't mean you sort of need to raise your hand and talk about the rest. But the reason I wanted to bring it up with you is because you actually are kind of like a macro investor, right? That's your domain of expertise. And you've seen many cycles and many sort of news events. And you tweeted something out that I thought was hilarious, which was like, here's a thread on my advice to you about trading during like crisis or sort of like these global events. And then, the thread was one tweet, which was like, don't, you're not going to have an edge sort of, doing arbitrage against headlines from CNN and Fox and all these other guys. Like, just don't kid yourself. But can you kind of talk about that? Like, you've seen, these different things. You've been an investor throughout. So talk about that a little bit more. What is your kind of mindset around that?
My mindset around that is nobody has any clue about geopolitics. So even at one point at a hedge fund, we hired the ex-prime minister of Israel to help us over the Iraq war. And basically the information he gave us was useless. And I've noticed it always. It's useless. And the market moves up and down on headlines. And generally it amounts to a lot of P&L pain if you try and trade it. Best thing is, stick with the bigger outcomes. If it's tied with a recession, it's different. Those things can see 1 year, 18-month bear markets. That's a different thing. These events tend to be short and sharp.
Right. And so your career is kind of funny. I was sort of tracking it, and it's so for those who don't know, you were at Goldman, you started your own hedge fund, and then it seemed like you retired, correct? You retired pretty young. You retired at 36. But I mean, now you have a company now, so you're not, fully retired and kicked back. But
no, I've got four jobs I'm doing right now. So
right, but you did have a break in between, correct? So like I think it was 2004 when you sort of retired from the hedge fund, and it was like 2014 or something when you launched, Real Vision. So what was going on in between? Were you doing nothing, or you were doing other projects I just don't know about?
I was writing Global Macro Investor, but that is a monthly publication. So I don't know why all of you guys do weekly newsletters or daily newsletters. That's hard work. So I wrote monthly. It's big. It's like, well, it started off at about 35 pages a month. And then due to inflation, it gets to about 130 pages a month now. But I write it in a weekend. So I was living in Spain, wrote one weekend a month. Sure, I need to monitor markets and talk to people, but it was a part-time job. So really what I'd done is kind of opted out of the rat race, moved to the Mediterranean coast of Spain. I was growing fruit and vegetables in my garden and almonds and olives and all of that stuff, living the beach life in Spain in the middle of on the side of a mountain in the middle of a national park, having a great life. In the end, you start missing intellectual capital, the people around you. Because most of the people, most of the year round in a beach town in Spain, work in a bar or restaurant,
right?
or they're in real estate, which is fine, but you feel very isolated when your world is global macro.
Totally. So describe the moment, because I think a lot of people listening to this. So just so I don't know how much you know about the podcast, but basically the podcast is usually me and Sam, who he's not here because he's traveling. He's actually in Portugal right now. We just sort of usually we're both founders. We both recently sold our companies in the last 2 years. We started the podcast after we sold, because that's when you have a bunch of time on your hands. And it's usually just spitballing different kind of like business opportunities, market opportunities. And so just stuff that we see that we think could work or is interesting, but we're not going to go do it ourselves. So this became our outlet to do that. And so you get like, we have like, I don't know, like over 1 million downloads a month. And those what the people who listen, what they're doing is, they typically are either like they want to start a business, but they don't. They have like a good paying job and they're thinking about making the leap, or they have their own business, and this is like they're doing this while they're doing their chores, and it's like, oh, I get to hang out with my buddies who are shooting the shit about business, because like we talk about stuff that they want to talk about. They just don't maybe have the friends around them that want to nerd out about business all the time. And so we kind of had that same thing where you needed that intellectual sparring to feel good. But the thing you mentioned, which was like, you sort of won one game, you're doing well in one game, but you decided to exit the rat race. What was that? Did you have like a kind of come to Jesus moment? Or did you have like was that a long time coming? How did that happen?
My meta narrative is the game is life itself. The game is not money. The game is quality of life and how you live it. So that was always my objective. So when I was on the tube in London at 5:15 in the morning to get to my desk at Goldman before 6, the reason I did it is because I knew that the next thing I wanted to do was go and live in the Mediterranean. I wanted to have that quality of life. For me, a lot of people think of money as the primary objective. I actually like houses, as you can tell from the house behind me, right? Because this is where I live. This is the quality of life. This is my bank. This is everything. And so I like where I live and how I live. That's why I live in the Cayman Islands. That's why I lived in Spain. They're beautiful places, and I live a quality of life. So that has always been my journey. But what I want to do is I always take steps towards the end game. I kind of live in the future always in everything that I do. So I always have a vision of my future self, or whether that's future state of financial markets, where I think it's going, whatever it may be, I'm always well ahead. And so I then can look, it's much easier to live in the future and look back and say, how do I get here? Than stand here today and go, I want to go forward. It's kind of weird. It's a psychology thing. And so I had realized that the Mediterranean was this life. And my ex-girlfriend, when I was at university, her mother lived in Mallorca in Spain. And I was there in Mallorca one point, and we were on this small beach eating grilled sardines. It was this perfect Mediterranean scene, right? Grilled sardines, somebody's making a big oil drum on the beach. You've got a cold beer, some grilled sardines. And on this little mini peninsula is a bunch of pine trees and palm trees. And there's this long table of like 30 people, 25 people of different age groups, parents, kids, grandparents, eating paella, the Spanish national dish, on this Sunday, drinking wine, laughing. And I'm like, that is quality of life. And so I kept that in my mind. And so I kind of facilitated it to happen that I would move to Spain.
Right.
And I did it in steps as well. So I did it in the step that I was speaking to my father. I was having dinner with him. And he's like, and I was just chatting over a few glasses of wine. I was like, I'd love to buy a house in Spain at some point. And he said, I've got a friend selling a house in Spain. A random thing. So I said, sure, well, let me know. So this is in the day of faxes. This is like 1998 or something. He sends me a fax of this 6-bedroom house on a hillside in Spain. I'm like, that's great, Dad. How the hell am I supposed to afford it? He's like, I was 30 years old. I was working at Goldman. He's like, well, I don't know how much it is. So he came back and said it was £150,000, which at the time was like 250,000 US, 200,000 US. And I just had a bonus and I thought, well, I could actually buy that in cash. And I did. And it was game changing. I had a mortgage in London and everything else. It was game changing because now I'd won the entire game. I've got a 6-bedroom house on a hillside in Spain overlooking orange groves, 10 minutes to the beach. And I could lose my job. I could
still have that.
Anything could happen. And I could work in a bar and I could live there. I'm done. Right. My game of life was won. So that was the marker stone to allow me to take more risks to do the next thing. And so that's how I've always done these things.
And how do you get that vision? So I'm the same way, but what I've noticed about myself is like I call them like these chapters. So it's like every sort of like 5 years is like a new chapter. And what I've noticed, if I go look back at the kind of last 3 chapters, so I'm 30, I'm about to be 34. So basically, 3 chapters, I've done 3 chapters now. And each time it was sort of this like fortuitous bounce where I get in touch with somebody and they show me a glimpse into this lifestyle or this kind of like mode that they're in. And then I just can't unsee it. I'm like, why the hell am I not doing that? Right. It's your version of seeing people eating paella, drinking wine at a 30-person table, just enjoying life by the water. And you're like, that's the that's the glimpse I needed to do it. So is that how you also got your vision for the next
yes.
kind of like chapter for you?
Yeah. And so the next thing was not, so I'd been in Spain and I realized the thing I was missing was intellectual capital, even though my clients were the world's most famous hedge fund managers, all of these super smart guys, but they weren't around me. They're all around the world.
Right.
And it was not as easy to get in touch. Twitter wasn't really around. There was less ways to be social online. Podcasts didn't really exist.
Right.
So, and then I think I probably discovered Tim Ferriss. And another friend of mine, Mark Hart, had gone down this journey of looking at Silicon Valley and entrepreneurship. And that was the thing that I thought, okay, this is the next thing for me. How can I take the entrepreneurial journey outside of, setting up my own research business, which was a one-man band, essentially? I wanted to take that entrepreneur's journey and push myself. I wanted to see what I was capable of. So that was the next thing. The cryptoverse is an incredibly exciting place, and it's going to be absolutely massive. This has been just a small taste of my own personal journey into crypto. Join me for free over on realvision.com/crypto as we discover just what this new world will look like and much more.